On the 3rd of July 2013, the Health Apps Network for Development and Innovation organised a one-day workshop at the University of Bradford in conjunction with the Learning Layers project. The focus of the workshop was on an apps-based approach to workplace learning and continuing professional development in the health and social care sector. Rather than the usual conference format of presentations to an audience, the bulk of this workshop was conducted in table group discussions. This video from the day is therefore somewhat fragmentary, but we hope gives an insight into the ideas shared on the day, including a number of Learning Layers projects which were presented to workshop table groups for feedback and development.
Welcome everybody, thank you for coming. As Eunice said, I work at the University of Leeds in Leeds Institute of Medical Education, and I'm currently working on the Learning Layers project. In fact, there are quite a number of us in this room who work on the Learning Layers project and are here today to help some of these activities run. You can pick us out because we've got the yellow badges today, so have a look round and see who's here on that. What I'm going to do now is just give you a very quick run through the activities that we'll be doing this afternoon. So the focus of the Learning Layers project is using technology to learn at work. And by learning at work, what we mean is that sort of informal learning that takes place as you do your job, is almost part of your job. So we're not talking about traditional curriculum-based training. We're talking about learning that's prompted by the need to find information, solve a problem, or improve your own working processes. That's the type of learning that we're interested in, and that's the type of learning that's going to be the focus of today's activities. Okay, so if you look at the agenda, you can see that in a couple of minutes I'm going to hand over to Dr. John Bibby, and John's talk is going to get us thinking in preparation for our first group activity, to get us thinking about how we use technology at the moment. That current practice activity will be trying to think about the tools we already use to support this learning and collecting that and sharing that information around the tables. Now, we've deliberately sent invites to this event out to as wide a group of people as possible because we thought that what we want is a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different ideas on how you use technology. So I think it would be helpful now for all of us to get a sense of who we've got in the room.
A poll of the workshop participants revealed quite a few primary care clinicians, software developers, IT project managers, researchers, and teachers.
That will do. It does look like we've got the good mix we were aiming for, and fingers crossed that will mean that everybody today should leave having come across at least one new tool or one new idea that they've learned from somebody else that they weren't aware of before. So that's what we're aiming for. And after you've shared all of that on that current practice activity, we'll take a break and have some coffee. I'm then going to give you, after coffee, a very quick introduction to the Learning Layers project. And I do mean brief, I don't want to be up here talking for long. And we then move into another interactive session, which is, if you look at your printed agendas, we've got 7 different design ideas to show you coming out of the Learning Layers work. And so you'll be working your way around the 7 different tables. You'll have time to see each of them. And then we'll get some feedback. Eunice and I will wrap things up, and we're aiming to finish on time at 5 o'clock. Right, with that done, and I hope that sounds interesting to all of you, I'm going to hand over now to John. John, as I think many of you may already know, has extensive experience in primary care, education, training, appraisal. He's also involved in technology, innovation and improvement. And I'm delighted he's working with us on the Learning Layers project. So we thought he'd be a great person to come and to start us thinking about how we already use technology to get us prepared for our first activities around the table. So, if you're happy, great. I'll hand over.
Please note, we have prepared a separate video of John Bibby's presentation.
So thank you, John. I saw people on my table noting down some of the apps that you mentioned, so that maybe people have already got new ideas, and I hope this activity will give you some more. What we're going to do is on each table there is a big sheet with these 2 questions written on it. Which apps or technology do you currently use or are you aware of? If you're a developer, it might be that you don't use them for your own learning, but you are aware of it or you're developing it. And why do you find these apps or this technology useful? And what we're going to ask you to do is, around your table, spend 15 minutes discussing that, sharing what you've come across, and ideally putting notes on the post-its and sticking them on.
If you want to put up your post-it, because we're going to try and keep this as a record, or do you want to, I mean, if you're happy to talk through a little bit, and then we'll have a look at it.
Do you want them on separate?
Please, do you mind?
We've got the online one.
Yeah.
We use these technologies for learning. There's one called More, Collaborate, and I think the bottom one's More, one's Collaborate, and I think one's
sort of Blackboard, is that?
Blackboard, yes.
Yeah.
So we use 3 of those. We use those technologies in the learning environment. And what it does is that it just provides the learning all the time. So we have lectures provided through that. And then you submit your essays, and then you have discussions and so. But all of the learning is done on that platform.
Right.
And then there is an app, the Mole app, that you can actually use. So you have a desktop version.
Yeah.
Then you have an app version, internationally. So you find you can get a better perspective of local things. Even local issues like, for example, the issue of implementation of electronic patient records. You find that there is an implementation, for example, of this same thing in, say, Saudi Arabia, or in Brunei. So you find people who are doing the same thing, but in
on
different
an international,
locations. And then we share the same problem, but from a different perspective.
Right.
And then the main thing we come away from, for example, is that there is a major driver, which is government policy.
Yeah.
So it's not really a private initiative to push the use of electronic patient records in each country. It's always a government initiative.
I have used Evernote before. To take notes and things. I've only really concentrated on the free version.
Right, yes.
And Evernote is good, but I don't. The thing that I have with Evernote is it's the reminders, and I want to take something that I've learned and I want to turn that into a task.
Right.
So I want to write, okay.
You want action points in your notes.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And then I want what I really want is to be able to use those, or be alerted to that.
Set it up on your calendar somehow. So
that's it. So then I know that, right, okay, I've got that down as an action point. Okay, I can't do it today, but and at least then you'd be able to move it and things.
So Evernote is just about recording your. Is it just
from the free version? I'm not sure
the more complicated version. Well, the one that you pay for. Right.
The cleverness is it syncs with your various things.
Okay. You can use it online. You can also use it on your mobile or tablet.
Right. Any other sort of tools that you think? So we've got the Evernotes and the mind mapping, which I guess they're both collecting information and trying to sort and organise it. Is there any other ways? And it doesn't have to be apps. It could be stuff on the computer.
What about what they call MOOCs, massive online open courses?
Yep. Have you done one of those?
I've done a few.
You've done a few.
Yeah.
Excellent.
But there's the iTunes University as well on the iPads and things like that, which is quite good.
Yeah. iTunes University.
But is that more? Would you consider that informal or formal?
That gets closer to the formal stuff, but I think I'd still like to note it down. I think it's still there. So, out of interest, which MOOCs have you done then?
I'm sorry, I've done a few. There's a Harvard University one called CS50, which is about computer technology. Coursera have one on healthcare and innovation. That was quite good.
Okay, yeah.
And there's a few on health informatics as well.
And that course, they had the multiple choice, but they also had short pieces of coursework you needed to do as well, written.
Yeah.
And there were 8. The reason why they're massive is there were 80,000 people signed on to this course when I took it. But they managed to mark those by you agreed that if you submitted something, you would mark 5 of your peers' essays, and they then had an algorithm running behind it that must have worked out what seemed to be a reasonable mark across all of them. And I thought it worked surprisingly well, and not just because I did all right out of it.
A perception that patients don't like medical professionals using apps because they think that this leads to a lack of personalisation, and that in the old golden days the general practitioners knew this person well, knew their entire history when they walked in, but nowadays because of the use of technology it's all become depersonalised. And that was a feeling, and also a feeling, at least because these were all app developers or researchers, that apps are almost, technology is inevitable anyway, and that will probably change. So that's fair.
Yes, that's not the point, because when we develop osmosis, the way it works is like a plug-in to your browser. So the key point was there's no click, so the GP in consultation doesn't click anything, so it just looks like they're doing their normal notes, looking up something on patient.uk, and it automatically records and sends it up. So therefore there's no physical, like I'm printing this out. Oh, I just had a great patient in. I'll print that out because that'll go towards my CPD. You know, you want to. There's no seamless.
The two issues that we always, when I was in training and now I am training other people, we tell them you have to. All of your senses has to be towards the patient. You should not be looking at the computer or anything else when the patient is talking, because people think that you're just not listening to them, which is very important. But on the other hand, you don't want to, sometimes you don't want to look too stupid when you don't know something, and you can't know everything.
You can't know too many things, aren't there?
If you want to check on a drug or something, when it's built into the system, in the computer, you pretend that as if you're doing the prescription, but you're checking all the side effects,
so you actually do something else.
At the same time.
I'm putting that one in caps because I think that's a critical issue. You can't know everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that is absolutely critical issue.
On the other hand, I have DNA, that drug formula, on my iPhone, and I'm on a visit home. I don't use it in the surgery because it's in the computer. I don't need it. But when you're on a visit and you don't have a computer, you can check it for all the side effects. But then I make sure that I tell the patient what I'm doing, because they think I'm ignoring them. I'm just making a phone call or texting at them.
Yeah.
So there are two sides of it. Yeah.
I mean, as you know, our 4th and 5th year medical students have iPhones, and we say to them, be professional.
Yeah.
If you tell the patient, I'm just going to look this up,
Yeah.
God, they understand, don't they?
Yeah.
But if you are on Facebook and texting your friend round the corner while you're meant to be concentrating, that is not professional.
Yeah.
And it's about, we're talking about our students rather than ourselves, of course, but it's about learning on the job. It's about learning while you're there. It's about near-patient learning, which is far stronger in terms of reflection and evidence. So our apps for our medical students are based on that near-patient learning. And I would very much like that sort of thing for myself.
So if there was a Facebook invented that was designated to GPs, either countrywide or worldwide, would that give you the trust to...
If I knew it was things like, you have to be a GP to sign up using your GMC number.
Yeah.
If you knew that those people, that no one else could infiltrate that, like pharma, whoever, to give us sway. And obviously, as GP, we've got interests in many different fields. I happen to be a director of a big company, and you wouldn't know that as a GP. So there's a lot of things that you have to assume people have interest in. Commissioners, conflicts of interest, that sort of thing. So you've got to be very careful as to who you listen to, but certainly you'd give more credibility to a genuine service for clinicians.
So a social network for
clinicians would be.
So that the mere fact of logging in with, sorry, what was it?
Your GMC number.
GMC number.
Knowing that you're registered with the GMC.
That would be enough to get you over that hurdle. To I trust what that person.
It'd be barrier to someone as long as
Google Scholar.
Google search and then honing it down through Google Scholar. And it makes a lot of the techniques that you're being taught as this is an academically kosher way of identifying papers for your subject. And it's okay if you search PubMed, but if you do Google Scholar, it's less sort of.
PubMed will come up anyway, won't it?
But A, PubMed will come up, and B, Google's got a much better search engine, so it actually finds things that you don't find otherwise.
Karen said, if you have limited time, just go to Google Scholar, because that's all get better
at least some people
rates, and it get better peer review, because you can see how many people cite that paper, and that means that have of better quality than a random paper without any people cite.
So what technology is that? I lost that one.
Google, I think
just Google Scholar.
Just Google Scholar.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you put it down?
Yes.
Cool.
Because I also use something called Mendeley. Which is MENDELEY, I think, and it's basically a reference. That's it. You can store your
reference
journal articles and papers and things, and then it will automatically cite references for it in line according to different citation styles and what have you.
Okay. So I see you use a lot your mobile. Do you read your papers on the mobile? PDF reader or something?
No, my eyes are too rubbish.
You do?
Yeah,
PDF reader on the mobile phone. Okay.
I do that a lot.
I'll write that one.
So I can read on my train or when waiting for someone.
Do you use repositories like Dropbox or Google Drive?
I use Dropbox. I use all of them.
Dropbox. Yeah, that's definitely one thing change how people share the file. And I use both, but I feel like but I feel like Dropbox is easier, more user friendly than Google Drive.
I've got Sugar Sync, 2 Skyboxes, Ubuntu One, 2 Google Drives, 2 Dropboxes, and 3 SkyDrives.
You have all
can you ever
combined
find
in your mobile accessible?
They're all accessible from there.
So make it easier for people to just find the things relevant to them. So I think that we talk about so the people moving from database to even to Gmail because it track the conversation. So actually that's a better mechanism than to talk in an open forum, and it's quite difficult to find which bit relevant and which bit outdated. But I don't know any software available can automatically group the discussion in different hierarchy, the focus. So I don't know whether you know some more similar things.
Come across any.
I think it's going to be very interesting, but it's very difficult to specify because, like, in terms of a clinical team who reflect a lot, and if you were individually recording your reflections, what would be is there a good program out there where you could all record onto the same document and? So throughout the day, if you have a piece of learning, you could record onto the same thing.
That you wanted to share within the team?
Yeah,
that could then... You have SharePoint?
SharePoint, but that's really expensive. I was thinking of Google.
Because you could just have a Word document on your system, really.
Most trusts I've been already got SharePoint, so you're just already reusing it. It's just nobody tends to use it that much.
We have that blocked, I think, at work. Because I remember when I was working at there was a time that I was trying to introduce it into the information center, and they said there was even though it was secure, they said they were not really happy with doing that. So I think probably that needs to be checked somewhere before it's been. But yeah, SharePoint is
the other thing is data not. I mean, imagine it's data not being hosted.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be secure, and they might be treating it securely, but it's not hosted in the UK.
Right, yeah. That's certainly an issue we've had with the app, and when we start sending information, then we can't do it via Google and things. It's got to be hosted in the right place. Yeah. Well, someone in that group mentioned about CloudMe, that's a free cloud website which hosted in Sweden.
Oh, right.
So that tick the box.
Yeah, Cloud Meet.
Yeah, CloudMe.
CloudMe,
Yeah.
okay.
So that can save things, and it's hosted in Sweden.
Yeah, probably that's another thing to consider within the NHS, whether they would actually want to. I'm just thinking of these cloud-based applications. Would they actually allow people to use them, even though it's hosted in US? In the
like
US
Kevin said, it's the security implications that come with it, because it's not held within the NHS net. It's quite easy for some, well, not easy, but if somebody was to breach the security to get in, like if you said patient information on there, you're leaving yourself wide open.
So would SharePoint be within?
SharePoint would be normally within your own internal network.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's you can customize it to suit your needs. The only thing with this is just that it's really, really expensive to use. But if you
At the end of the morning workshops, the posters compiled by the facilitators were displayed upon the walls, and we were then treated to a splendid lunch.
I just want to give you a very short introduction to the Learning Layers project so that you get an idea of where the ideas you'll see on the tables have come from and where, as a project, we're heading to, and whether you'd like to come with us, I guess, in some sense. So, first of all, what exactly is the Learning Layers project and who's involved? Well, it's a research project funded by the European Union, and it's funded under their Technology Enhanced Learning funding stream. So this is not healthcare funding, this is funding for Technology Enhanced Learning. As you can see from the map of partners up there, we have quite a range of partners from across Europe involved in the project, who all bring different expertise to it. And the problem that the EU wanted this project to address was to look at how small to medium-sized enterprises could make better use of technology to support learning. And that learning at the workplace, they wanted to support it in order to help these small organisations to become more competitive and to be more innovative. And so within the partnership up there, what we've got, obviously, is, as you'd expect, is partners with technology, expertise and skills. We've got partners with technology research and educational research skills. But perhaps most importantly, we have 2 regional application clusters. And it's in these clusters that we're actually working with the small organisations to understand how their staff learn at the moment, and to work with them to develop ways in which technology can support them. Now, those 2 clusters, John Bibby has spoilt it by telling you about construction already. One of those clusters is small construction companies in northern Germany, and the other cluster is primary care in West Yorkshire, and specifically we're looking at GP practices. So 2 pretty different areas. Now, we're not developing tools that we're saying one tool will suit both sectors, but we're looking at both those sectors to see what similarities there are and what differences there might be in supporting them. So in the healthcare cluster, where I work, Leeds Institute of Medical Education, we're responsible for overseeing that part of the work. And in doing that, we're working really closely with the West and South Yorkshire and Bassett Law Commissioning Support Unit, who are also partners in the project. And we're also working with 3 GP practices, 2 of whom are very local indeed to here, the Ridge, which is just down the road, Great Horton Road, and Picton Medical Centre, which is in Manningham. And we're also working with Fisher Medical Centre, which is in Skipton. So with the CSU and with those 3 practices, what we're doing is spending time with them to understand how their staff currently learn. And then we're working with their staff. Their staff are co-designing learning tools and technologies with us. Okay. And as John and I have both mentioned earlier, the sort of learning that we're trying to support here is learning going beyond individual learning, going towards tools that support team learning, and even more tools that support learning and sharing across organisations. So actually trying to find ways in which we can use the technology so that GP practices can learn and share across an area. And for that reason, we actually have each of those GP practices I named are in a particular, there are 3 CCGs in this area, and they each come from a separate CCG. So we will be working with the CCGs first and then spreading out. Okay, so where are we in all of this? Well, it's a 4-year research project, and it started in November 2012. So we're really only just at the start. We're only just over halfway through the first year. And as this project plan shows, we're very much in the explorative design studies part of the work. So we're learning ourselves at the moment, coming up with initial ideas. And what you're going to see next is that each of the tables here, we've got 7 tables set up, will have some design ideas that are coming out of the Learning Layers project or being brought by linked projects to us. And those ideas, some of them are really at early stages, so you'll see paper prototypes to give you an idea and explore some of them. And some of them will be on mobile devices. And some of them are more developed tools, because they're tools that partners have brought from previous projects. So you'll see a real mix there. And I should say as well, the Open Design Library, Patricia, sat here in front of me, will be talking to you about the Open Design Library. And one of the aims of that is that it's an idea to help us to share these designs and keep sharing them beyond this workshop, so that we can, as a wider community, actually take ideas and develop them. So she'll explain that when you get to her table. What I've also done, because I knew that there would be an interest in this from the people coming to the workshop, is I have my colleague from the University of Leeds, Nancy Davis, here, and she's going to, on her table, talk to you about the apps and technology that our medical students currently use. A few people in the room have already said to me that they're aware of the fact that the School of Medicine is at the forefront, really, in use of mobile technology for medical education. That's true. We've won a number of awards. We've had students using iPhones for about 4 or 5 years now. So Nancy will take you through what we're doing with those students, and bearing in mind that these are the future healthcare professionals, and so what the tools they use now in their learning, that's likely to have an impact on how they learn when they then go into the workplace.
In the second workshop session, we did a kind of speed dating process to hear about and comment on the various Learning Layers design ideas. The following video clips sample 4 out of the 7 ideas on parade.
So one of the streams is something called Pandora, and this stream is what we're just going to be talking about. And the idea is, as I was saying in my introduction, can we, in some cases, manage to make the learning that an individual in a group has greater if you share it with everybody else? And we've taken the example of something called significant event analysis. Although this could be applied to lots of other things, but GPs understand significant event analysis, so we're just hanging it on that peg at first. And significant event analysis is a positive learning tool for when something hasn't gone quite right, how internally you can reflect on it in a structured way that means that you can work out what you might want to do better in the future. So it's not particularly for when there's been major complaints and big hoo-has. And basically it's just a 4-box bit that you say what happened, who was involved, discuss it, what we've learnt and what we're going to try and do differently. And so to put it in a context, one of the other people thought this was going to be a blame thing. It isn't a blame situation actually. Every GP needs to include any significant events they've had in their annual appraisal, so there's a need to do this. And you're meant to discuss them with your peers, your practice, A, to get wider learning, and B, so that everybody else can not make the same error, or if it's a...
Sorry John, can I just ask you a question about that? Who decides when something is a significant event?
The individual person, so
Okay.
there's no outside people. So a significant event can actually be something positive that's gone perfectly well, and sort of wondering why it went well this time when it doesn't normally, kind of business. But usually human nature is that the things that haven't quite gone right. So it might be the person who normally signs the repeat prescriptions was called out on an emergency, nobody else was there to sign them, so the patients had to wait an extra day. You know, and so it's a system. It doesn't necessarily mean I gave penicillin to somebody who should never have penicillin, though it could be that. So it's often a system thing, and that's why you want to share. So you bring it to your monthly meeting, you all discuss it, it's documented down in those 4 headings, and basically it usually gets put in a drawer and forgotten about. But if we're in a practice and we discuss it, but Stephen is much more reflective than we are, and he doesn't contribute just there and then because it's all just been and done, but over the next week he's thinking about it, has some really good ideas. Well, we can't benefit from those, it's in the drawer and locked and gone. Yeah. This is an idea that if we put it up on the web and that's something or other, and then over a period, the next week or 5 weeks or some time, people are allowed to put their thoughts that they might have had later on in there, and other people can rate them, and then you come up with a final version later down the route. Then your solution for what you want to do might be more sensible and reasonable than just what you've done in that 10 minutes when you've just done it. That's the principle.
You look at the document and then you add a comment. You just say something about the whole document, you know. Maybe something about action, or just something that you want to say about the document.
Yeah, I think this is the most important bit of it. So.
And then you can share that. You can see how many aggregated number of comments, number of views, number of votes. So that's the simplest version. In this one, you can actually highlight a bit of the document. Yeah. And add a comment to that. Yep. And then you can share it with specific people in the group.
Okay.
You can also rate it. So, and that is also aggregated. So if you think that's actually the nub of it, this is the most important bit in the document. So this is the bit that's going to change what we do in our practice. Then you would give it a star. So, although we have been thinking actually, maybe we'll talk a bit about rating and what you think about that as a thing to do and how efficient it is and what it actually means, because that is something, now I'm talking about, I'm thinking,
Is there more to it?
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking there is.
But in a practice, at the moment, what happens is that it's written up and it's just done. So even if only one person comments on it, it is potentially more learning than what we've currently got. So it depends what your success is.
So what you were thinking, that people would just talk about it?
Well, I mean, it's going back to, because it's similar. I mean, where I work, I was learning about the NHS interface standards.
Right. Okay.
And what I noticed when I went on there was an NHS England were commenting on LinkedIn.
Right.
But there was a reluctance of people to post in the first place because it looked, I mean, I'm a contractor.
Right.
I don't want to look as if I don't know something because that would be bad business. But then again, I've come round now, this is probably after a while, thinking like, shall I post front end? It's probably better to know that I'm asking the questions and I've learnt it, because a couple of posts down, I'm posting advice sort of thing. So, I mean, but there is a reluctance, what I was basically saying, there's a reluctance to post. If you start putting ratings on there, that'd increase the reluctance. But it is a similar sort of way. It worked then because there were probably about, I don't know how many there are, there's probably about 100 of us across the country, but we're all geographically distributed. And LinkedIn works brilliantly. And when you do post, there's a lot of people there who post thinking, I was thinking the same question. And
it's just taking the courage to be the first person to admit.
Anything that's a bit more reflective than now might work.
I mean, another way that we work internally is we've got, say a document and we're sort of specifying it. We tend to store it on SharePoint, which is smaller towards this. But we also use, I've been trying to nag people to use the commenting feature within Word. So then you've got your comments there and and you get conversations along the side of the document. And I quite like that, which is exactly the same, I think, really.
It's very similar. The idea here was instead of actually annotating the document itself, you've got a lot of comments, then you met together to say, we now need to write the definitive one rather than it being written that way, but it's very similar in principle.
I think you probably need to think about this being anonymised, certainly on the front side of things. Because if you've got a practice manager in there, or the senior doctor, or anyone in a position of power over anybody else, you're going to risk them having to toe the line to stay in line with them. You've also got to, I think there's a case to be made for maybe until everyone's put their vote in or everyone's looked at it and decided whether they're going to comment or not, you probably need to hide everything from everyone to stop people having a hive mind to it.
Good thought.
Because if someone says, "Oh, we don't need to worry about this," someone else will go, "Yeah, I'll do. Vote that one. Yeah, brilliant."
I think those are. In fact, what you're talking about there is, and it ought to be able to be used in different ways. Because I think the individual practice, depending on what its culture is, can perhaps choose some of those. Some of those will be really important. Some practices they'll be less important than some practices where it's really open already.
I mean, maybe you make it so it's on the user side of it, so you can say, I'm going to post this anonymously, or not.
I agree with all those.
With the rating, rather than just being a yes or no question, maybe say, do you rate this as helpful, informative, useless? So instead of just being I rate this, you say why.
Crucial, you can do all sorts of things.
And I think I don't know where they came from, but the person, I think it was Andreas in Germany that actually did this bit. Was it? But I think that bit pressing the button to move to kind of move it up the rankings of compared to others. Not so much of voting. I think it was that moving the ranking. So you have to.
I think that's a little teaching.
Basically, what I'm going to show you are some of the apps we've developed for the University of Leeds Medical School to accompany a mobile technology program we do, which enables the students, specifically for those in the 4th and 5th year who are out on placement almost entirely, to access various resources for their learning. So, basically, I'm going to tell you first of all about a couple of apps that we have which interface with our portfolio, our online portfolio system. All the students use that across all 5 years. And basically, the first one, Progress File app, enables you to just make notes. Very simple app, just a little bit of a note, and it goes straight into the portfolio. And the student can keep that privately, or they can share it with the tutor if they want to. And the idea is we're encouraging them to learn in the moment and make notes as they go, so that they don't forget stuff. But also, when they come to write, we ask them to write reflective essays at the end of placement. They can gather up all the notes they've made, and they're able then to remember properly all the things that happened to them in placement.
So is that saved locally, or does it go to...
It goes straight to the portfolio system. All the students with their iPhones have got unlimited data connection. Basically, our students, when they're out in 4th and 5th year, they don't come to the university, they don't have access necessarily to good technology. By loaning them all an iPhone, it enabled us to be able to provide better services to them and for them to remain connected to us at all times. The students love just the fact that they get their email, which is a simple thing but a very useful tool. We've also got the Minikex app, which is an assessment app which enables the students to gather feedback on various skills that they'll do while out on placement. They get basically rated on some of the skills, but they also, very importantly, have an area where the assessor can give them text feedback at the bottom. And then the students then have an area where they can add comments themselves. And again, it's about capturing really good quality feedback when they're out on placement, instead of just working with a consultant who then says, yeah, you're fine. It's about them getting the kind of feedback that they can then work on and plan on with for future. Hence the area for them to make their own notes on the kind of feedback that they've had from their assessor, so that they're getting that whole reflective cycle there.
Does that mean the medical school can monitor the quality of the feedback they're getting as well?
Yes.
So
All of this assessment goes back into the e-portfolio system, and importantly for us, previously we couldn't really monitor our students out on placement, other than occasionally hearing that they had missed a placement, they were absent or something like that, to know that there might be an issue. Here we can monitor and we can see if partway through the placement they've only done one or none at all of the assessments, and as a result we know there might be a problem, and we can monitor them and get in touch with them. And because they have their email, we know that they have a means to get their email and to receive that feedback from us.
but can you see the assessor's feedback comments, like it's like sort of like a tweet list or something? So if somebody's ranting at every single student you see, you're an idiot.
Yes.
You can spot the idiot comments coming up.
Absolutely, yes. It's a very useful tool, because within medicine we don't actually know who will assess our students. We have a policy where the students can get feedback from anybody. And really nicely, it means we can track who are the people who are giving feedback to our students and what's the quality of that feedback as well. Again, monitoring the placement experience and making sure it's a good one for the students. And for the staff too, because it enables us to see the kind of comments the students are making about their learning experience, and we can then feed that back to the staff as well.
Because we get quite a few clinical skills tutors who will feedback, not necessarily the consultants or midwives if they're working in gynae.
Yeah, or pharmacists,
it's really good for interprofessional.
Yes. And that's what we encourage them to do with that mini kex, is to not necessarily just get from other doctors, but from other professionals. So that enables the students to capture learning, and when it goes into the portfolio system, they can then match it against frameworks like Tomorrow's Doctors and provide evidence to show that they are actually meeting the skills they need to. But we also give them a lot of resources as well, because one of the other things we want students to come away with is a very good understanding that firstly they can't know everything, so having access to really good quality resources is key, and not to guess, very importantly. If you're not sure, look it up. So we give them access to Dr. Companion, which gives them a number of key medical texts. I think they're all on there. I don't know if they're enabled on the iPhones you've got, but they will be on my one. But basically, they've got like the BNF.
My validations failed.
Yeah, they're a bit out of date now, unfortunately. But the students love this. It's the main key textbooks, the Oxford handbooks, BNF for children. And with these, they can make notes and they can illuminate bits of text and annotate it and bookmark pages, and they can look at their browsing history, so they can have a look at the kinds of things they're looking at. And shortly we'll be able to monitor that as well, to see what our students are looking up and to see the patterns of how they're referencing resource material, to see if there are any that are, to use it as a marker of if there's any that are struggling because they're still looking up the same stuff over and over again, that kind of thing.
Or if the instructor isn't providing good teaching.
This is an idea which, as you can tell, being paper-based at the moment, is very early in its design stage. Just to check, be able to relate it, has anyone used Evernote or a tool like Evernote? You've got one. Okay, right. I'll tell you where the idea came from. We went to see one of the GP practices, and we were talking to a GP about how they learned at the moment, how they managed their informal learning. And what they told us was that at the moment, when she came across things she thought were interesting, that she'd like to follow up, that she felt she wanted to know more about, the kind of informal learning that we were describing earlier, she would drop it physically into a physical box file. So it would be, even if she found it on the web, she might actually print it out and drop the web page into a box file.
What sort of things, showing my kind of preferences, I can't imagine what sort of a physical thing I might come across. In other words,
journal paper or something
and so she would actually have a journal paper.
She would actually put the journal paper in the box file, or the article she'd
some
come
of the
across
magazines and
in.
stuff. So it's all.
So it was
paper-based information, digital information, but printed on paper in the first place.
A lot of it, yeah. So she would collect all of this, and then she would aim to go back to it maybe once a month to look through it and try and identify which bits she actually did want to follow up on, and what kept occurring, what else she needed to do, see the patterns. However, she didn't think it was working, perhaps for the reasons that you allude to. So what we wanted to look at was whether there was a better way of managing this. Now, electronically seems to be a good way of doing it. You can use tools such as Evernote that allow you to collect things easily, like pictures, videos, web links, and send them to your Evernote folder. So it's like an electronic box file. But I use Evernote quite a lot myself. Didn't feel it entirely did what you'd want, because there's still the risk that you've sent stuff there, but you didn't actually go back to it to look at it. So we wanted to see if there was a way of designing something that could prompt you to go back, that was sort of gave you different visual ways of looking at the information you'd sent through to help you see the patterns in what you were sending through. So what the developers have come up with at the moment, and the other thing we wanted to do was, at the moment, her physical box file and Evernote to some extent are very much about individual sets of information. We wanted to look at whether there was a way of making this more shared, supporting that sort of shared.
Have you seen an app called Wunderlist?
I haven't, but
okay.
Yes, that's the if it matches onto shared.
Wunderlist. It allows you to set up lists, but it also lets you put deadlines against items on the lists.
This sounds like it might do what we want.
So you can call your lists, I don't know, shopping, wish list. I've got one. So I've got shopping on wish list. I've got what I normally get from the Chinese restaurant, what I normally get from the Indian, and you can create lists with the items in and deadlines for. So that might be worth. And you can share them. You can share the lists.
Okay, that sounds brilliant. We'll note that down, because this is. Some of the things we're doing is we do not want to overlap with tools that already exist, and if we can work with them instead and add to them, that's even better. Okay, so what they've proposed at the moment is that you would this tool would be used. You'd gather information in the same way as you do with Evernote, with an app on here, or just emailing something through to yourself. But what I'm going to describe here is what you would then do when you went to try and make sense of what was in Evernote. So they're suggesting a split screen here, and in the top screen you get to see all the things that you have sent through, but in this sort of visual way, and the type of things you might be sending through could include notes to yourself, it could include a web link, it could include videos, audios, all sorts of different media. That green one is me. At the moment I'm only looking at what I've put into my Evernote, into my box. But if I choose, I can find someone else in the practice, and I can decide I'd like to see what they've added, which this would be things they've added that they've said they're happy to share. And I can actually have a look and see what they've put in theirs as well.
Is there a way of identifying duplicates?
That's a very good point. Yes, you would want there to be a way of doing that.
I can imagine the day that the new white paper comes out or something, everybody gets the Safer Hospitals, Safer Wards article in there or what.
One of the things that one of the practices suggested to us was that they would actually like there to be this kind of super user, which is like essential or the practice view, which might be those key things, rather than everyone going, I'm going to add that, I'm going to add that. Actually, those would be this essential practice view, and someone in the practice would have responsibility for putting those in, which overcomes some of that problem. Right, so you've now got all of this stuff in here, and I'm now in the position of wanting to go and review what I've put in. So at that point it becomes, this is a sort of work area down here, and I'm able to just drag and drop the things that I want to work on today, that seem relevant to me today, and I just pull them down here. And when I pull them down, I might think I'd like to annotate that, I've got something I want to add to it, and I might choose to also open it up to comments from other people. And I'll say it now because it is one of the things that we were, a GP suggested to us, was that they actually thought you might want to do something like you'd said, I think the Wunderlist does, of being prompted then to say, well, actually, what are you going to do with this bit of information you've pulled down here? What's your actual planned action for this, and when do you want to do it by? So that you can then use that to set up a reminder to yourself, so it doesn't just get pulled down. Actually, those three all seem to be related to me, and actually these two are related as well, and they're actually sort of seeing it as though it might, ideally you want a user interface in which it is as easy as that, and you're able to start grouping things and moving them around, and then you would having grouped something, you might then think, well, why is it I grouped those, and you actually start labelling your groups, and so in a set what you're doing then is you're beginning to make sense of what you've put into that box.
I think I might, rather than necessarily grouping them, I might prefer to identify relationships between documents where I can name the relationship. So a bit like a data modelling approach. So I am a bit of a data modeler at heart.
It's really interesting you've suggested that, because that was one of the views. We had a sort of view like this that you might want to do on linking things, and the people we spoke to weren't really sure that they would see that, but it sounds like you would find that kind of view useful.
I mean, it doesn't have to be either or. I mean, obviously
exactly.
But I mean, for me, I might say, like, the relationship between this article and this database is that the data there refutes that or something. So
yes, so you would be able to. So you would want to be able to label these relationships, wouldn't you, as well?
But what you need are a series of scaffolding prompts. So it needs them. This assumes that the person is going to be doing it subconsciously, initially, whereas it's assuming that they've got the skill to do it. So there needs to be some way of doing it, rather than having a user manual. There's a prompt that, say you've collected a line, when you go onto it again, it says, would you like to see if they're aggregated or whatever word's done? And then once you start doing that, then a prompt comes up to say, like things like, do you want to see if there's any relationship between them? Do you want to see if there's, are there any themes?
I think you're right. I mean, I think that kind of prompting people would be extremely useful as scaffolder.
Because this could be very useful for bringing in feedback, multiple sources of feedback, so that you actually begin to synthesise multiple sources of feedback to look at the main themes.
Okay. So you would maybe have put a filter on your view up here to say, today I'm only looking at the things up here that would feed back. And you'd start pulling them down and then thinking, well, how are what are the patterns? What seems to be happening in these feedback? Okay.
So patient comments, peer group comments, practice team comments. So they'd all be there, but you'd want to try and make some sense out of what they all mean.
Yeah.
So just to sort of rewind a bit, so over time, each individual person builds up this kind of rich personal library, if you like, which has got all the cuttings and document sources there, and their evolved view on what they mean and how they interact with each other.
Archiving it is something that people have mentioned. Another one that people have mentioned is actually, I may have put stuff in, but perhaps something should fade from view because perhaps I put it in, but I never went back to it. So maybe it really
there's
wasn't
a kind of concept of half-life or decay or something, which says information has a currency, which decreases over time.
It's like my study, it's got piles of papers everywhere and I can't be bothered to throw them out, but I know where everything is.
It sounds very much the process, without how it's going into details, it just sounds like what I tend to do anyway. I just tend to write a piece, but I never go, if it's something I'm going to use, I'll just whack it onto cloud storage, but I'd probably still flick through here because I'll just have like WWC this. And it's just really, for me, it's the process of writing it down is how I've learned. I don't tend to go back, it's just taking the notes. I might
think
go
that
back 1 or 2 pages.
having an interface like that might really help as well. So just the act of dragging and dropping things and thinking about, is that one related or are they in the same group, will do a lot of
because it's physical, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think there is something. I'm with you as well with the writing. There is something about the physical thing that.
Well, there's that whole.
My name's Graham Atwell. Along with Martina, we work for Pontedusky, which is a partner in a Layers organisation. We're a small and medium enterprise, well, a small company actually, involved in research, development, all kinds of things, learning, knowledge development, you name it, we're in it. We're based in Pontypridd in Wales, and I'm sure you all already know that Pontedusky stands for the Bridge to Learning. Hey, cool, you're one of the first people I've known who's ever got that. I told you earlier.
And it's written down, so.
It's Pontedusky. Anyway, Kevin, where does Kevin come from? We'll tell you why Kevin in a moment. But it all goes back to a very snowy day in Bradford in, I think it was the 13th of February, because it was 3 days before my birthday, that's why I know. And we came, a lot of us from the Learning Layers project came to Bradford to meet people from the NHS to sort of swap ideas both ways, I guess, swap our ideas about some initial technical stuff, but probably even more than that, to learn, to find out what went on with learning in the health service. And some point through the afternoon we went out for a cigarette break, me and my colleague Jenny, and 2 of the doctors joined us. And we got talking to them, and we said, what do you think about the event? And they said, it's very good, but you know all these formal presentations where you're told how important it is that doctors these days are involved in lifelong learning, continuous reflection on their learning. It's a requirement, it's needed for revalidation. We said, yeah. They said, well, it's all very good, but it doesn't really work quite like what they're saying. We don't actually record every day what our learning was. Shock, horror. Why not? Well, they said, well, let's put it quite simply, we don't have the time. So they're making more and more demands on our time every day. They're giving us more and more work. This is just an extra thing to do. We said, well, when do you have time? And he said, one of them said to us, well, really, the only time I've got is in my car when I'm going between appointments of patients, or when I'm going between meetings. That's the only time I've got. So we said, well, why don't you use your voice recorders in your phones then and record your learning then? And one said, well, I'd feel pretty stupid just sitting there talking to myself. And another said, it's not a bad idea, but how would I structure it? Where would I start? I wouldn't know where to start. So an idea was born.
Graham then described how Pontedusky entered into a partnership with Karlsruhe University, whose students actually developed the app.
Now, why the name Kevin? Because, as you might have got earlier, this is some kind of speech-activated app. Apple released one, they called it a really stupid name. People said, why did Apple call this Siri? What a stupid name. Why didn't they call it something sensible? Well, the reason is if you're going for a voice-activated app, you need something which isn't contained within common words. And as far as we've been able, and we've got a competition running on this, nobody has yet come up with any word in English or German which contains the name Kevin. Kevin is a spotty, lonely kid. So we use Kevin as the name for the voice command. So how does the system work? And as I say, we're going into open beta, and it's free from the end of July. Well, what could you use it for? Well, those were 3 ideas. We started off with the top idea, be good for reflecting on learning. That was one I explained to you. That came from the doctors, not from us. This idea of using it for meetings came from consultations Tamsin held with surgeries here in Bradford, where they said, we've got an issue. We can't afford to send lots of people off on staff development events, so we typically send one person to a conference or staff development event, and then they're supposed to report back to the rest of the practice. But several people intimated to us this process isn't too smooth at the moment, and the report back doesn't always quite get done on time and doesn't always reach everyone else. And they said it'd be really nice if we could have a really easy app to help us do report back. So that was an idea. This afternoon, a stack of other ideas, a few more ideas of what it might do have come out, including some very interesting ideas about potentials to merge with patient record numbers and patient records, which are intriguing, some of these ideas. I'm sure some of them will never happen, but some of them also some big ideas about how we can use it in research. Really, what you get? Within your own accounts, you set up an account which is linked both to your phone and to your computer. We will move it to probably use open authentication. It's actually built in but not implemented yet. So open authentication allows you to use other things like Google or Facebook to authenticate as well, rather than set up your own account. So you can set up your own account, or you can it may actually even support OpenAuth now. I've set up as many stacks of questions as you like yourself. You can edit your questions as well and save them. The questions can range from 1 question to 50, well, or more than 50 as far as I know. My charming assistant here will now demonstrate to you. We would love to be able to demonstrate the whole thing working. We've got too much voices in the background. All right, very quickly, they've cut us on time on this one.
Yeah, so you have an overview over your stacks that you created previously, and then you can choose one.
What was the major aim of the event?
We'll ask you questions. You can say, next question, Kevin,
help me.
Kevin, skip this question, Kevin, end. It saves it and uploads it to the computer, and you can convert it automatically to text, and this is where people are getting rather interested. Yes, you can now begin to see the implications of this. You can set up your own questions, or you can use pre-set stacks, uploads it automatically, saves it as text. We're getting about 97 to 98% accuracy. You can obviously edit. We'll get 97 to 98% accuracy on the text upload. And both Apple and Google are working to improve that part of the software, and we use their software. It will be, as I say, Android at the end of this month, iOS hopefully by November. We've got various business models. We may offer you your own domain area for your business. If you're an NHS surgery, then you come under Layers project, and you'll certainly have even the premium features which we may develop. You'll have access to free, but the application will always and forever, and we give you from as Pontedusky this assurance, the individual application will always remain free, although there may be premium apps and parts to it in the future.
It's any job where you have meetings and you're spending a lot of time going between places, and it's useful to record first impressions. Say, for instance, you're someone that does site visits as part of your job. If you've got your list of templates, what were the issues today? What do you think that you could do that already?
At the end of the day, a quick round-the-room survey to see what people had got out of the event.
We'd just like to capture, as I said, what people have found as particularly interesting about what they've seen today, and if there's one tool that they think would be, oh, that's really a good idea, that's really novel, that's different, we could see how that could be used or developed from what you've seen. That'd be really useful to us. I know people want to get off, but for the next 5 minutes, that would be really, really useful, please. Are people happy to share that?
to make a broader observation, if you could find some standards for developing apps and making apps talk to each other, so that because lots of them seems to have not necessarily overlap, but nice intersections, let's say. And so if you could have some sort of architecture which allowed them to be developed such that they are quite interoperable from the word go, that would be a good thing.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So there's interoperability generally, so it could fit in NHS systems, but also between what's being developed now. That's really useful.
I got to learn a lot more about the apps and the technical side of things as well, and how they can be embedded in the different health and social care sectors.
Is there anything that you think particularly that you could find useful?
In terms of me personally, I really like the software, the app that's being developed, the Kevin app.
Okay.
And
can I ask why?
It's innovative, and it's something that I possibly could use, later on in the future.
Can you think of a scenario? Well, I know you're not a medic, but can you think of a scenario when you would use it?
Possibly, because I'll be starting work soon in a full-time environment, and I'll be learning as well at the same time. So it just helped reflect. It helped me reflect, and
so you feel that'd be useful. Okay, that's fine. What about
Open Design Library?
So why did you like that?
Because it's like a repository of ideas, and what you find in there is that different people will collaborate for different ideas to develop different apps for healthcare. So it seemed like a really lovely place to be able to bounce ideas.
Okay. How about yourself? Do you want to share anything around here?
Yeah, well, the one that grabbed my attention most, I think, was the simplest one. Is it significant?
Pandora.
The Pandora one.
Yes, I thought it was a neat idea. You've got a fairly simple, well-specified problem that the technology would be perfect for.
Sure.
You could do it better than it's being done at the moment. I was also impressed by most of the ideas for apps, but some of them are a bit future. We've got this idea, but who's going to use it? What is it going to be for? I just like that one because it starts with the problem.
Yeah. There needs to be a critical mass of activity and there will be false starts, but until you start getting a lot of false starts, you won't get the ones that actually do succeed and start generating that environment where there's a sort of real market for apps and people take it seriously and consider it as a good way of making business work.
Okay.
I think it would also be good to find out what people are using at the moment in those areas, so that you can see whether those are actually available at the moment, open source, and you build on from that rather than having to start from the scratch. Because I think a lot of the tools, you have bits and bits of them already existing, and it would be really good to see whether you can actually build on those rather than having to.
So maybe a piece of work is to look at what we've got already, what we're developing, and to see what the niche is. How is it different and how not? So that's useful.
Lots of really good ideas. I think I'd reiterate that point about the really good thing about Pandora is that it starts with a problem. There's lots of great functionality all over the room, but sometimes it's almost what's that actually going to give the user. And that needs to be thought about.
I agree. The significant event analysis stuff, I think, is problem focused. And has a definite advantage. I like this stuff about how we manage the immense amount of data to be gathered and pick out the relevant signals that signify to us that we've got a learning need from the background noise, which is immense. I think some of the ideas, the shared environments for learning are clever from an IT perspective, but I think there's a lot to be learned. There's a lot of naivety out there at the moment about what is actually needed at the coalface. There's a lot of things can be done, but I think some aspects, some parts of the group don't know what other parts of the room do. Both ways round, I have no idea about some of the IT stuff, and I think some of the IT stuff has no idea about what we do. And so the event itself is a good idea. But I think we've got a long way to go yet before you actually get.
But it's early stages in the project. I mean, as you know, we're doing ethnographic work to see what people really want and looking at. Some of these have been developed from the discussions, some have already been developed, and I think it's now consolidating. Where do we go in the future?
I think it's generalisable outside of just primary care as well.
Yes.
You know, from an education background, there's lots of things that can be picked up and used for preparation of students and stuff as well.
And that's what I thought. You can see big similarities in transferability of many of these as well.
Which is really useful.
That was the same point I wanted to make. You can use them in all sorts of settings, most of these apps.
Okay, great. Well, should we wrap it up? So, thank you very much for coming. I'm sure Tamsin would like to say.
One slide.